Yes, I know this review is nearly a week late. Go and watch the I Love Compossible a Lot review that I edited to understand why that's the case. This is it. The final season has begun, and to call your starting hand the beginning of the end is not only ballsy, but it's foreboding and unnerving in equal measure. Will this produce the seismic goods that we want, or will it shrivel up under pressure? It's time for me to tackle the Season 9 premiere on this edition of Pones N Stuff. This premiere had a lot on its plate, having to provide an entertaining showcase while still surprising us in equal measure after 8 seasons of sending our heroines on adventures. They've not got another chance to actually repair any damages if they end up appearing, so I was hoping they'd find a way to please this criteria. What we got was something interesting, to say the least. Season premieres in the past have often stood on their own without connecting themselves to the wider season that they initiate. Sure, Season 4 and Season 8 managed to do that, but then the episodes that followed on from it didn't really give us the goods that we expected from overarching plot points. Do you remember that box? You remember the School of Friendship and the students? They weren't really a thing until much later in the season's run. So when I look at what Season 9's premiere has initiated, it fills me with glee, but also with apprehension. That being said, what it got away with in its 44-minute runtime will put all the rest of the premieres to the woodshed for their prior actions. This is predominantly the case due to the fact the first part takes the piss out of traditional two-parter conventions, subverting them in quite hilarious fashion. Twilight overreacting causing problems, the princesses being inactive in moments of crisis, and the fact that they can just rush in and defeat a villain when all hope seems lost without much real problem. They were all called out on, making their efforts in stopping Sombra feel as routine as your weekly trip to the supermarket, pedestrian and incredibly trivial. The second part ramped up the drama and emotions, taking us on a thrill ride with the deck stacked against our heroines more than ever seen before to ensure it was thoroughly entertaining. Combined with its lore expansions, thematic strength with a tale of leadership, challenging oneself and learning from mistakes to come home fighting, as well as the dueling narrative structure switching between conflict and intensity between the villains and our heroes before converging into Sombra's vain conquest. With a Discord death fake-out thrown in, as well as Tree of Harmony's destruction, and expansions to the world building and wider continuity, it ensured it kept you on your toes as the overarching plot of the season, which is Grogar's eventual battle with our main 6, and Twilight's ascension to the throne of Equestria being solidified for the much anticipated series finale. It managed to hold itself together quite well, but it did manage to let a few things slip through the cracks. It was structured so that the first part built tension quite slowly, only for the second to throw the kitchen sink at you, being much faster and in your face by comparison. It felt disjointed and dizzying in equal measure, not allowing you to take it all in with much satisfaction when you just wanted things to not be as distracting. The tonal balance, though, it shifted along similar lines much to my dismay, as it turned from comedic and lighthearted in the first to foreboding and frantic in the same vein as the pace in the second. It meant that the moments of drama and comedy that were in either respective part, if they weren't coded from the outset, just felt as unwelcome. And when you have inconsistencies plot-wise, especially for Sombra, where his introduction post-Elements banishment wasn't explained and didn't make much sense, especially given that the Crystal Heart conveniently didn't kill him for the plot's sake, what you have here is a premiere that excited but irritated in a way which, by now, at this late stage in the game, we should not be seeing. Thankfully, it was supported very well by its moral implications as a message of self-confidence, leadership and determinants, as well as admitting the need for help, gave the episode concrete meaning that never swayed, especially when you factor in the contrast with Sombra's cocky and narcissistic demeanour, really placating it throughout the entire episode from the beginning. And while the message around being a strong leader did fall a little flat, the rest of the themes surrounding it pursued a valiant effort to give this story of impending massive upheaval and weight all the rigidity it needed to feel full, despite leaks still appearing regardless. While the story's efforts were not completely misguided, the bits that were damaging enough to be a cause for concern, albeit the morals were actually quite solid. They were almost as tip-top shape as they could be, despite one small blip causing irritation. What I will say though is there's a lot of good things to come from this episode the further I dig in, but there are some things still that are not on as well-trodden ground, so to speak. There's one part especially that gets me quite irritated. Visually, this episode stunk of tired and lazy complacency, not really taking your eyes on any sort of experience, except for occasionally flashing little tidbits before you, only to have them disappear just as quickly. Sure, Pinky's spiral eyes, some nice sky colours, Sombra's dual destructions, Grogar's design, and an exuberant amount of extremely satisfying facial expressions were there, but it was flagrant in its offerings across the whole 44-minute runtime, making this premiere one of the most visually starved two-parters that we have ever seen. Dutifully though, William Anderson's bouncy and buoyant score more than made up for it, cloaking the barren visual scenes with uplifting orchestral motifs that made this journey feel as epic as it could be, despite limping through minimal sections of unnerving narrative disposition. The most successful part of the episode, however, was the character writing and voice acting, which highlighted a refined and driven desire to give this premiere all it could and more. And I cannot complain about any of the voice actors' performances here. They did exactly what they needed to do and a bit more, especially in Tara Strong's case. She pushed herself a little too hard, but it's why we do love her. And speaking of her character, Twilight's rollercoaster of emotions was fun, albeit cliched to see unfold, as she showed, just as Luna and Celestia had foreseen, she may be a nervous wreck, but with confidence she can get the job done when push comes to shove. A good final affirmation of her character development over the 8 seasons prior coming to fruition. The main 6 provided great supporting roles, filling dead air with great personality inflections and helping the emotional moments carry some weight, while Spike, Starlight, Cadence, Starswirl, Shining Armor, Celestia and Luna added more glue to keep things solid, while Cozy Glow, Chrysalis and T-Rex surprisingly returned to do the exact same tremendous balancing act opposing their heroic counterparts. And in relation to that latter group, I was kind of worried going in seeing Sombra return, especially given how underwhelming his initial appearance in Season 3 was, but thankfully this episode did something that I never envisioned, make his magic and strength more than live up to the level of threat that they warranted prior, but also corrupt his personality to make him more well-rounded. Some will complain that this overconfidence diminishes his character, while I'm going to proclaim the opposite is true, as his powers are so damn strong, he can turn anyone into a mindless zombie, obeying his every order and battling against his foes on a whim if they are not mentally strong enough. So it's no wonder that he's as big-headed and as confident as he is, because if you had the ability to do that, and the fact he can, it comes with the damn territory. And the fact that it's counteracted Twilight's inverse feelings superbly as well, which I've already noted, makes the evildoer's character development one of the most inspiring, well-built and well-executed that this show has done, period. It's great to see a villain that I once hated, or technically still do thanks to what happened before, get the groundwork he sorely deserved from the outset, and it was worth the protracted wait to see it happen right in front of my face. On a similar level of praise, keeping Grogar's role restricted for expositional and lore expansion purposes was a smart move, allowing him to gradually build up as the season goes on, leaving his true power to be a mystery. Because if he can magically give Tirek his strength back, I'm looking forward to seeing how he develops and how much of an obstacle he will be come the finale of this show. Because it's going to be a gargantuan battle, and it's making me salivate just thinking about it. And on the final level of this conveyor belt of praise, it's time to talk about Discord. I had said for the longest time last season that, well, he should sacrifice himself for friendship to prove he had reformed, and, well, he did just that, didn't he? He didn't die, sadly, but to do something so great for his character arc and give a rousing emotional speech, which I will admit I teared up at, was the cherry on top of the cake. Now sure, he reverted to type once the battle had ended, but I will give the writers benefit of the doubt on that one. They seemingly achieved a goal that was necessary, and, well, if they didn't manage to do it, then they can expand upon it later down the line, which I will not mind as long as it has value to it. And, well, to add another cherry on top of the cake, how cool was it to see so many of the mindless Sombra zombies be characters from Ponyville and Canterlot who were important to the main six in some form? That's just fantastic. It showed the writers paid attention to the continuity of the show and ensured that the process of the struggle for our heroines was made even more impactful. It's stuff like that that just makes me appreciate the show even more. A person who's watching for the first time with this episode, which is misguided enough, wouldn't really get it. But for someone who's watched for long enough, who knows where all of these little pieces came from, it just warms my heart to know they acknowledged it. And seriously, if you pick out some of them, you think, oh damn, this is pretty damn impressive. At the end of the day, seeing this premiere do so much without breaking too much of a sweat was quite a relief to witness. The writers had their heads mostly screwed on to give us a nice, bountiful present for seeing so many of similar ilk come and go, while giving us some maturity along with it that we'd expect given the show's age rating, but not watered down to a point where it was unpleasant. Sure, some aspects of continuity were absent, it was disjointed pace and tone-wise, and it was lacking in visuals, but the sum of its parts, with music, writing and the story, and the morals as well, as a whole, did more than enough to make the occasion worth seeing and build up hype for what will eventually come at the season's end. It's rare for a premiere to set up so much in advance, but unlike its brethren, it's a welcome change as it ensures that we will stick around for the long term, knowing what is going to happen at some point, and doing as I mentioned earlier, in linking everything together at such a pivotal moment, it makes itself bigger on a much larger scale than few that came before it could match. This premiere then, while it did stumble over some elements that it could have easily mended, was still rewarding and worth the time, surpassing expectations and proving that when an episode such as this is done with competence and assured ability, even when it falters, it can still get back up and reach the finish line, scraped but unhurt. It's not a bad start, not bad at all. Overall, The Beginning of the End scored a total of 17 out of 25, which is a B-. In closing, this premiere took a few missteps, dropping it from phenomenal all the way down to great, but thankfully, those missteps were mostly visual shortcomings, meaning when I look at everything else, they had a job to do and for the most part they achieved it, which is a great thing to say. Now, the rating I have given may not reflect the overly positive connotations that I've given, but it does show that if some things are done wrong, they can be easily forgotten if pretty much everything else is on point. And well, we got that here, and for a premiere such as this, in a season such as this, I couldn't have asked for a better start. The good thing is that this is a marathon. Most other seasons breeze by without much due care and attention. I can tell that the writers, the voice actors, the animators, and William Anderson and Dan Ingram have a lot of tricks up their sleeve. If this is the starting hand that the gun has fired on the way for this marathon to reach its completion, we couldn't have started any better. Okay, sure, we could have started with a 20 out of 25 instead of a 17, which the visuals could have easily encompassed for, but I will take this over something subpar. Definitely, most definitely indeed. And if, like I said, this is the beginning of the end, I can't wait to see what the rest of Season 9 has in store, because if it stands up to similar quality as this, I could be in for a very enjoyable ride indeed. I have been Freddie Thomas, you've been people watching, this has been the CC Network, and I will see you all next time.